Hello. This is my first time using Reddit and I'm not very tech savvy, so please ignore any typos or formatting mistakes. I am here to ask if I was the a-hole for refusing to meddle in my daughter's fight. I have two daughters who have an age gap of 4 years. My elder daughter, I will refer to her as Serena, she's 29. My younger daughter is the one who got married recently, I'll call her Nina. These are not their real names, of course. Nina and Serena stopped speaking for some reason and it's been 5 years since they last spoke. They had some big fights during the holidays 5 years ago, but we never found out what exactly the fight was all about and they still haven't told us anything about it. My wife and I stopped asking after the first couple of weeks and just accepted that they wouldn't talk to each other anymore. They would attend family events and come back home for the holidays but wouldn't speak to each other or even look at one another. And then for the last 3 years, Serena hadn't been able to make it back home for anything because she'd received a job offer in Siberia for research which she'd taken up. She didn't come back home for 3 years and would only FaceTime us because she said it was too tiring to travel back and forth for her. That's why she was never able to meet Nina's boyfriend, now husband, who she introduced to us 3 years ago. Nina's husband, Matt, went to high school with Serena and they were classmates. My wife and I became quite fond of him really quickly. He was well-spoken, educated, and very ambitious too, so we thought he was the perfect man for our daughter since they shared a lot of the same qualities. In fact, they'd even met at work because they happened to be working in the same company and in the same department. They'd recognized each other from school and had bonded over that at first, which then became a proper relationship. Serena didn't know about any of this because we kept our children's lives separate. We didn't talk to Serena about Nina and vice versa because it was clear that they couldn't care less about one another. However, I did receive an unexpected call from Serena about Nina a couple of weeks ago. She was pretty hysterical while talking and even started the conversation by accusing me of being heartless and playing favorites. After she'd calmed down, she told me that she'd had the biggest crush on Matt in high school and apparently, she knew that Matt was only doing this as a way to get through to her because they'd lost touch after high school. I don't know how she'd found out about the wedding, probably through some friends from school since Nina and Serena had blocked each other on social media, but they did have a couple of common friends since they'd gone to the same high school. She said that she couldn't let this wedding take place because she knew that Matt and her were meant to be and Nina was trying to steal him from her. So now, she wanted me to punish her and make this right by disowning her unless she let Matt go. I thought she was kidding because nobody can even imagine their own kid saying stuff like this, but unfortunately, she was quite serious about it. I told her that she'd lost her mind and that I wasn't going to do anything of the sort, so she went back to accusing me of playing favorites with her and her sister and even said that I'd always taken Nina's side over hers. That was not true and she was just making that up to play the victim. At the time, I told her that we could only talk when she wasn't being hysterical and crazy and then disconnected the call. I didn't tell anyone about that phone call that day because Nina was happy, Matt seemed happy and so did my wife. And I was pretty sure Serena wouldn't be able to do anything because she was in Siberia at the time. I kept it quiet because I didn't want any of them to get worried about this without reason. Serena texted me about it 2 days after the phone call and said that I had to disown her sister or she'd be forced to take matters into her own hands, but I said that I knew she was bluffing and warned her that if she tried to do anything funny, I'd have her disinherited and thrown in jail. I believed that was enough and after that, Serena didn't call or text me either, so I assumed it scared her off. 3 days ago, Nina got married, but unfortunately, Serena managed to have their ceremony delayed. She'd planned to get it cancelled altogether, but that didn't happen, luckily, because my wife and I had reached the venue just in the nick of time. So the location where Nina was getting married was a significant distance away from our house. We'd planned on spending the night before the wedding in the hotel nearby like everyone else, but unfortunately, we couldn't leave our dogs alone at home. We have 2 senior German shepherds, but the dog sitter who usually takes care of them when we're away had fractured her ankle and wouldn't be able to make it. Our neighbor said that he'd take care of our dogs, but he was going away for a business trip that week and would return only on the morning of the wedding. We didn't trust our dogs with anyone else and Nina didn't want us to leave the dogs with some new sitter either, so we decided that my wife and I would spend the night before the wedding at home and then, the next morning, we'd hand over our dogs to our neighbor as soon as he returned and head over to the venue for the wedding. Luckily, our neighbor returned and took the dogs by 8 and we left for the venue. Because we left a little too early, we were the first people to reach the place. We reached it around 10, but by then, most of the decoration outside the wedding hall had already been completed since the wedding was supposed to start at 11. We expected the inside to be just as beautiful as the outside, but unfortunately, the first thing we saw was graffiti that read "Boyfriend Stealer" in bold, red letters that had been painted on the wall behind the stage where Nina and Matt were supposed to exchange their vows. My wife and I were shocked and I instantly knew that this had been Serena's work. I rushed to the wall and when I realized that it was still fresh and reeked of the metallic spray paint smell, I told my wife that Serena couldn't be too far off and I was going to go call the cops, but she stopped me and said that it was more important to fix whatever had happened than go after whoever was responsible for it, which made sense, so we decided to do something about this before Nina arrived. I asked her to call someone to get this fixed before the guests started arriving, and if they did, I'd stall them so they wouldn't go in and see that written on the wall. The goal was to make sure that Nina didn't find out about any of this until after everything was over. I didn't even call the police or anything, which I now think might not have been the best idea. The venue, unfortunately, was separate from the hotel and had its security, but the guy responsible for it hadn't arrived with his team yet and was still stuck in traffic, which is why Serena hadn't been able to get in at all. It was just bad timing for her. My wife and I had been dealing with the graffiti situation and speaking to the hotel staff. By 10:15, my wife had thankfully been able to contact some of the employees at the hotel who were kind enough to arrange a white screen to put up in front of the spray-painted wall. They usually had that for conferences but lent it to us for the event when they found out what had happened, which was very nice of them. The hotel wasn't too far away, so they were able to bring the screen to the venue and mount it on the stage quickly enough. Thankfully, it covered the graffiti completely, but it did look a bit odd, so the staff members who had brought it over even went to the extent of writing Nina Weds Matt with a bunch of hearts on it so it wouldn't look oddly empty. Once that was sorted out, we could finally breathe a sigh of relief because now, at least Nina wouldn't have anything to worry about before the ceremony. Soon enough, the security team arrived as well, and we knew that Serena wouldn't be able to get in even if she tried to enter after this. At around 10:30, the first guests started trickling in, and because the situation was fixed, we didn't have anything to worry about. Nina soon arrived and we had the first look and everything. Then I walked her down the aisle, and while she'd been a little surprised to see the screen behind the stage, she didn't mention it or ask about it, and the ceremony took place without a hitch. It was only afterwards that she questioned me, and I finally told them all the truth. After the reception, everyone headed to the hotel, and from there, we'd all go back home the next day. At the hotel, Nina and Matt came to our room to ask why there had been a screen behind the stage and why there had been such a strong smell of spray paint coming from it. Until then, I hadn't told anyone about Serena, not even my wife, but I finally spilled all the beans on what had happened, and once I was done telling them, I realized that Nina and Matt were thankful for what I'd done, but unfortunately, my wife was furious with me. Nina and Matt thanked me for making sure Serena didn't ruin the ceremony or mess with their mental state before it in any way, which had clearly been her intention, and then said that they'd explain everything about the situation once they returned from their honeymoon because they wanted to enjoy these few days. I was all right with that, and once they left my wife and me alone in the hotel room, I asked her what she wanted to do about Serena. She then put me on blast and said that what I'd done had been irresponsible and stupid and that I should have known better. I didn't understand why she was so pissed off when everything had worked out well and asked her why she was so upset, and she told me that I have a savior complex. She thinks that I should have warned Nina and Matt and even her as soon as I received the first phone call, or at least when I received the next text from Serena, because it could have just as easily been something worse than just spray painting Nina's wedding venue. My wife started saying that Serena could have easily tried to harm Nina or Matt in other ways, and that it should have occurred to me to tell them about it and make them alert instead of trying to hide it all just to protect them. I thought that was an overreaction because it wasn't as if Serena was a criminal. She was just jealous and maybe a little crazy at the moment, but I didn't think she was really going to hurt Nina or Matt physically. She kept arguing with me that she could have, and that it was my need to constantly act like I was doing everything for the best and be the savior in every situation that had put them in this situation. Had I warned them at the time of the phone call, then Serena probably wouldn't even have been able to get into the venue at all. We got into a fight over it and haven't spoken properly for 3 days. For the record, I don't have a problem with my wife, but she's really pissed off with me and I cannot figure out why. I wanted to make Nina talk some sense into her and explain that I'd done the right thing in this scenario, but right after their wedding, she and her husband left for Greece for their honeymoon, and I don't want to bother them right now. They'll be back in 4 days, but I don't want to be fighting with my wife for 4 whole days, and I need to know if I was the a-hole her or not, and if I need to apologize. So Ida for not warning my younger daughter about her sister's disturbing phone call a couple of weeks before her wedding. Update 1. Hey, everyone. It's been 2 days since my original post. I decided to take the advice most of you guys had for me and talk to my wife about what she'd said the other day, because many of you thought that there was something more to this than what she'd said. I'm not very good at picking up on hints, so I guess that there must be something more that she was talking about, and the comments made me realize that it was definitely the case. So I talked to my wife last evening and she seemed to be in a slightly better mood. As it turns out, you guys were right. She wasn't just referring to the incident with Serena at the wedding where I'd tried to play the savior, but there have been several more instances of me trying to be the good guy who protects everyone's feelings and tries to spare everyone. When our daughters had their falling out 5 years ago, I tried to lie to Nina and Serena both one time and invited them both for dinner on the same day, and when they showed up at the same time, Serena left because she said she couldn't stand to be in the same room as her sister and told me never to lie to her about this again or she'd cut me off too. My wife said that what I'd done was unnecessary because they were both adults and had decided not to speak to each other, so I needed to respect that instead of forcing them together. She hadn't said anything at the time and had hoped I'd get over this trait of mine, which I've apparently had for a really long time. She even brought up a bunch of examples from the past, and I realized that maybe it was, kind of, a problem with me. And I probably should have told Nina and Matt about it when I found out what Serena felt about the wedding. So I apologized to my wife, and I'm going to apologize to Matt and Nina once they return, too. I don't know what Serena is up to currently because unfortunately, I hadn't called the cops on her on the day of the wedding because I wanted to protect Nina from having her day ruined with the police coming by. And she's blocked me, so I can't ask her what she's up to either. I'm pretty sure some friend of Nina's must have told Serena about the location of the wedding, but nobody knew that they were taking off for their honeymoon from the hotel themselves, so Serena won't be able to find out where Nina and Matt are. My wife and I are on better terms now that I've accepted my mistake, and I'm hoping that I'm able to change this particular quality about myself. It's not doing anyone any favors. Update 2. Hi, people. Nina and Matt just returned from their honeymoon 2 days back, and this morning, they visited me and my wife to talk about everything that had happened at the wedding and before it. We finally found out the cause of the big fight between Nina and Serena, and I can understand why they didn't want us to find out now, because it's not very nice for a parent to hear things like these from their own daughters. 5 years ago, around the time of their fight, Nina had been telling her sister about some guy that she'd gone out on a date with. This was quite some time before she met Matt. When she showed her sister a picture of the guy, Serena flipped out on her because apparently that guy had also matched with her, and they found out that this particular guy had been two-timing Serena since she said she'd been seeing him for a couple of months now. Instead of getting mad at her supposed boyfriend at the time, Serena got mad at Nina and accused her of always sleeping around and stealing my guys. Nina explained that this had happened earlier, too, when one of Serena's boyfriends had expressed that he found her more attractive. Nina had never flirted with that guy, and it was very creepy for her because she was 18 at the time and Serena's boyfriend was in his early 20s, but still, Serena had blamed Nina for it. They'd made up after that first fight, but this time, Nina couldn't look past the sleeping around comment, and things got really nasty and vicious in that particular fight of theirs. So much so that they decided never to speak again, and here we all were. My wife and I were both really disappointed and uncomfortable with the things that we were told, and felt that maybe we'd failed in raising our daughters, but things were about to get much worse. She told me that Serena had been continuously harassing her online while she was in Greece because she couldn't find her in real life. She'd sent her a text saying that she'd permanently moved back here just to make sure she got Matt back, and now, Nina was planning on getting a restraining order and changing her phone number too so Serena wouldn't be able to find her out. They'd only kept this on hold because she was trying to enjoy her honeymoon, but now that they were back, they were going to file for a protective order against Serena because clearly, she'd snapped and gone crazy. It was very emotional for my wife and I to come to terms with the fact that our daughter had turned out to be so psychotic and downright evil, but there was nothing we could do to help the situation now. My wife pretty much broke down after she learned about Serena's behavior. Even though she'd been expecting this, it was still heartbreaking to know this for sure. Nina tried to console us both because we were shattered and tried to tell us that we'd been the best parents and this wasn't on us, but we still kept thinking about what we could have done differently to prevent this from happening. Matt told us that he'd never even spoken to Serena or even known about her existence back in high school, so he really didn't know why she was so convinced that he loved her, and told us that this was just her being delusional and stupid. This had nothing to do with us. Matt also tried to convince us that this wasn't on us at all, and even added that Serena had always had a very creepy and weird vibe around her, even when they were back in high school. That was a little surprising because we'd always thought that she was well liked and popular, but Nina and Matt told us that was never the case. In fact, she'd been a total loner, and that was mostly because of her short-tempered personality and bad attitude, which put everyone off. She used to have a bunch of people over for her birthdays every year, though, so that was confusing, but Matt and Nina told us that most of the people who would come by would only be here because of the promise of free drinks. They told us that every birthday, she'd invite a bunch of people to our house, and then whoever wanted to get drunk would go to the backyard, and that's why so many people would be there. We'd always let her celebrate her birthdays with her friends and leave the house to her because we didn't want to intrude and we trusted her, but evidently, that was the worst thing we could have done because she totally misused that. So basically, one day, my wife and I found out that our eldest daughter was a psychotic weirdo who used to bribe her underage friends with free drinks to come attend her birthday parties so we would think she had friends. What a terrible day for us as parents, but at least now we know that Nina and Matt are going to get a restraining order against her and they'll be safe from her. Update 3. Hi, folks. Thank you for all the love and support that you guys have shown me. I think this is going to be my last update here for a while, now that things have been sorted out. Nina and Matt got that restraining order against Serena recently. She'd been living in an apartment a few blocks away from Nina's house, as it turns out, and had been stalking her, but she hadn't found out yet. It was scary how deranged she is now, but at least they're safe, and that's what really matters to us as parents. Nina doesn't live in that house anymore and ended her lease a couple of weeks ago to move in with Matt, so she got lucky there. They were able to find her with the help of the police, and from there on, it was relatively easy to prove that she'd been intending to hurt them, and her crazy behavior at the hearings didn't help either. She's also had to pay her for the damage she did to the wedding venue. We also disinherited her and changed our will to exclude her altogether from everything. The only thing that she'll be receiving is a diamond bracelet that my mother had left for both my kids, one for each. They're only supposed to inherit it after I also pass on, but since it was my mother's decision, it didn't feel right to take that away from her because it wasn't my place to do so. But that aside, Serena isn't inheriting anything from us. No part of our estate, none of our money, and it's a considerable amount because both my wife and I ran a successful business for quite a few years before retiring voluntarily 2 years ago, seeing that we'd saved enough. Neither of our daughters was interested in running the business, so my trusted assistant of many years took over. I was going to split the company's shares between my daughters, but I think now, it'll go to Matt and Nina. We haven't informed Serena about any of this yet because we know she won't take it kindly, but also because there's no need for her to find out until she can no longer do anything about it. I mean, sure, she can contest a will after we're gone, but we don't think it'll hold up very well in court when they realize what a horrible daughter she'd been to us. She's cut me off entirely and my wife, too, so we don't think we're in any danger from her, but at the same time, we've still increased the security measures around our home and are much more alert. We don't have cause to worry yet though, since she's shown no interest in talking to us. If she does say anything, though, I'll make sure that I go to the cops first because right now, there's no telling what she might do.